Try that again. Okay. Lesson number 3, here we come. First of all, thank you everyone for joining the previous 2 lessons. Also, a thank you for those who sponsor the breakfasts. We appreciate all the breakfast sponsorships, making it happen so that we could enjoy ourselves both spiritually and physically. And now we are going to begin lesson number 3. You're probably wondering why there are flowers on the table. It has nothing to do with Valentine's Day. Maybe David will give a class about whether or not a Jew should be celebrating Valentine's Day. But I'll leave that in his in their professional realm. It's a little bit outside of my area of expertise. But it is an important subject anyway.
My wife will love it.
And by the way, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be celebrating days of love for spouses. I'm just talking about the particular day of Valentine's Day. Anyway, that being said, getting off subject here. Obviously, we'll get to the flower. We'll get to the flower. And those of you who are at home, if you have a flower, I will tell you this: if you have a flower sitting in a vase or something, pull it out. It will coming up during the class. And I see there's some people just signing in now. Al, Vivian as well. If you have a flower, it will be helpful during the class. So in previous lessons, we were talking about the world of spiritual meditation. We were talking about using our mind as a tool to look under the hood of reality to discover spirituality. We realized that spirituality is not something, a different or separate existence from whatever we have in the world around us, but it is actually the true definition and the true identity of everything that we actually have in life. Everything that exists is this aspect of spirituality. Now, the problem is we are materially driven individuals, so we don't always feel it. And that's why we need time to reflect hisbonenus, spiritual thinking through spiritual meditation. We talked about 2 types. Talk about hisbonedut, which means separating ourselves, looking away, completely living in a more oblivious type of stance of meditation. But then we said that in a practical sense, it's really about hisbonenus, which means cognitively meditating on the spiritual nature of and to develop awareness and appreciation, everything that we have spiritually. Anybody actually tried working on this a little bit during the week? Yes? Good, very good. Very good. You did also? Good, very good. Because obviously the idea over here is not just that we should get some information and then move on, but these are actually things that can change our lives every single day. When we change the way we think about life, will be different. Fact. That is a fact. So, with the hisbonenus meditation, we talked about it's not about transcending or escaping the everyday experiences, but it is about discovering and living and appreciating what actually exists in this world. Now, this word hisbonenus, let me put this up on the screen for you guys online. Now, this idea of hitbonenus, which we said means cognitive contemplation, comes from the word bina, understanding. It also comes from the word binyan, which means to build, to construct. And that's because we are building, we are constructing a new perspective. Take a look, text number 1. The Hebrew word hitbonenut, contemplative meditation, stems etymologically from 2 root words, binyan. When we practice cognitive meditation, we build ourselves as a result of gaining more profound understanding of our environment. So this is hitbonenut. You see the figure over there. It means both bina, understanding, which we dealt with at length last week, and also binyan, to build. And when we talk about spiritual meditations, the goal is not just to experience it for a moment, but to build a new way of seeing our life, to build in life a new way of divine consciousness. And today we're going to deepen that spiritual perspective through meditations that will help us. By the way, is there anyone that wanted breakfast that did not get? Because there's still one there? You got the last one? Okay. Is there anyone that didn't get? I'll tell Hanan to bring more. We have more. So this is going to help us see the world better and deeper. So what do we basically learn last week? Last week we basically learned that that just as we possess a body and a soul, and our soul is the life force that animates our body, makes it function, it makes everything that happens. The same thing, there is a spiritual force in everything that happens in this world as well. And everything that happens in our lives, everything that happens in the world, our truest identity is the soul, which is the spiritual aspect, giving it that life force. And that is what animates it, and that is what helps it be. So this idea of having this this force, this being, it's not only like an electricity that you have. It's just giving it some movement of something that's already existing, but it's actually everything that it has, the very essence of its identity, of existence, happens constantly through this force. Text number 2, King David exclaims, "My soul blesses God," Psalms 103:1. Orchi nafshi es Hashem. So we actually recite this every Rosh Chodesh to remind us of this. And why did he feel the need to emphasize that it was his soul that praised God? He told himself, just as the soul fills the body, so does God fill the universe. Even though it possesses the same qualities as God, praise him. So this is what King David was comparing. The way the soul fills the body, the same way is the way God fills the world. And there's basically 3 aspects to this, which we're going to take a look at now. Number 1, you have the idea that God's presence is manifested in the world, to say that God is here, right? And God is part of what happens. But the second thing is more than that God fills the world and is present in every detail. Not just that he's looking from above, as we're going to talk about, but he's actually involved and present in everything that takes place. And thirdly, that there is a conscious soul that guides reality. And it's not just that he's giving life force and hoping that someone's going to catch on, but that there's actually be a picture. There's something that is coming together, and God is making everything happen in a specific way, in a particular way. And this is what we're going to talk about more in detail in this course. Not just the idea of God's being here and giving energy and life force, but the idea of that the conscious soul actually guides everything in a specific way, in a particular way. They say that the children were lining up in a cafeteria and there was a pile of apples, and the teacher posted a note that said, "Take only one apple, God is watching." A little further down the line in the corner, there was a young boy who scribbled on a note and put it next to the cookies, and it said, "Take all you want, God is watching the apples." So what does it mean that God is watching? And this is really the key to today's lesson. And understanding this and appreciating this is going to help us so much in life to be able to take everything that happens in a calm way, in a relaxed way, and not allow ourselves to get overexcited or upset or angry in anything that happens in life. So let's take a moment to look at the human soul. What is the human soul, right? Because we're not comparing it to ourselves, the human soul. The soul is the essence of the life force of the body. It makes the person alive. So its presence is everywhere. And this is the idea of the soul's consciousness. It provides everything that it needs to exist, to live, to look. It gives the ability for the eye to see, for the ear to hear, for the hands to move. Anytime we move something, we do it so normally. But when the fact is that it's actually not happening that easily. It's actually of emotion that's going from our mind and telling us to do what we're doing. And unfortunately, when things aren't working perfectly, then we suddenly realize how important it is to have that life and to have that energy to keep it going. You know, two weeks ago, I was going to take the kids out, and I really badly hurt my back. But I bent down, and suddenly pain going all the way down my leg, and I wasn't able to move it. And then, thank God I'm doing better. But the idea is, it's something that's like walking. You take it for granted. And suddenly I got in the car and I was about to take the kids. And I said, I can't drive. And so you realize at moments that everything has kind of force and energy that's keeping it going. And we just take these things for granted, but it's not lifeless. And once the soul leaves the body, you can see how slowly but surely the body decomposes and whatever happens to the body. Let's take a look at text number 3. The highly detailed self-awareness in a manner in which our soul operates within our body will allow us to appreciate every detail of the universe, and that each detail exists and is sustained through divine energy. This parallel is expressed in the teaching, just as the soul fills the body, so does God fill the world. And is expressed in the verse, "For my flesh, I can perceive the divine." Every sensation and experience of the body, even the most insignificant, is an active expression of the soul. Similarly, even the smallest detail or phenomenon within the universe is actively directed by God. When we develop this awareness, we sense not only the divine providence in everything, but we see the divinity clearly wherever we turn. We can literally see divine exposed. And this is a very profound spiritual awareness, to notice not only that everything comes from God, but that everything is an expression of God. In other words, not only is God as an outsider happening and keeping an eye, so to speak, looking at everything that's going on, but that everything that's happening in the world, he is very much involved with. How plants grow, how animals thrive and grow, how the DNA of every object, the way it comes about, the way different creatures survive, the way the universe operates. And today, scientists are starting to learn more and more about that whatever we take for granted on a surface level, I mentioned, realizing that there are tiny these subatoms that are that are energy and everything. We now know that what we see on the surface, there's much more really than what the naked eye sees. We use the term. We're gonna talk about this a little later. That mashgiach is someone that's job is to look, right? As opposed to what is a mashgiach? Mashgiach is someone that is like someone that's watching, right? In a like for kosher food or whatever. Every detail. We're going to use that story to see this in that way. Let's take a look at text number 4. The entirety of creation divides into 4 kingdoms: mineral, vegetable, animal, and human. Each of these is subdivided into myriads of specific species. If, for example, in the world of plants, for example, we encounter a broad spectrum of vegetation, such as trees, crops, vegetables, grass, and herbs, each category of which is further divided into multiple species. There is an astonishing variety of trees, and each kind is unique and distinguished from all other trees. There's a tremendous diversity of plants, of herbs, and again, each kind offers unique nutritional value. Some are beneficial, while others are poisonous, and they each carry a unique design and set of properties. Furthermore, within each of these subspecies, there are countless individual units, each of which is similarly unique. Now, each individual unit possesses a unique life force, divine energy that is tailored for it. That life force is what we call its soul, the spiritual entity that animates it, causes it to grow, and guides everything that happens to it from the moment it sprouts from the earth until its last moment when it's plucked. Even the plant's final fate is within the jurisdiction of a specific divine providence that determines whether the plant will be harvested for an overt purpose, such as animal fodder, trampled underfoot in an apparently aimless manner, or wither in due course and disintegrate entirely. Just as a matter of specific decision and calculation of divine providence. Everything in this world has a unique divine energy that it is life. That is its life and guide. Each blade of grass is unique. It may appear identical to another blade. A closer examination reveals specific features that set a specific blade apart from every other blade of grass in the universe. This distinction is a result of the specific divine energy that God invests into this blade. It is an entirely individualized divine manifestation. There's approximately about 8.7 million unique species on Earth. And I even asked Google. So, and each of these species, each one has its own characters, its own nutrition, its own everything. talking to someone on Shabbos and saying that the grass here is not as good as some other grasses in places. If you want to feed animals, horses or cows, to feed here is not as good as certain grasses up north. You know, to me, well, grass is grass. No, there's different types of grass. So everything, these it's specific characteristics, its distinct color, shape, nutritional value, etc. Text number 5. Within every species, we find this as well. What Simon said, each blade of grass has a spiritual force that strikes it and tells it to grow. So not only at every species, but within every species itself, every single blade of grass has its godly energy within it. And I want to point out that this is not a contradiction to science. On the contrary, Torah very much fits with science. If you study Torah properly and you study science properly, then you actually see that they go very well hand in hand, and they're not contradicting each other in any way. The job of science is to discover the what of the world, and spiritual study is the why. It's more philosophical study is the why. And science keeps discovering more and more and more. And a true scientist will say, wow, look at this incredible godly energy in everything that I keep discovering. The minute we think we understood it all, there's more to understand, and there's more to understand. But again, science is the study of the what. They could only see what things are. They can't understand the why. And sometimes when you conflate the two, that's where you get stuck with the so-called contradiction, but they actually very much go hand in hand. So it's good to study things and to learn, and you understand the greatness of God's creation the more we do. So when we see a blade of grass growing from the earth, you are witnessing the process, seeing God's force in the world. By observing the world, you are seeing God every single moment. I'm going to take a digression for a minute. Only because it's important to talk about this from time to time, and this is a good point to mention this. One of the reasons that burial, a Jewish burial, is very important as opposed to cremation is because a Jewish burial allows for the process of the soul. As the body is decomposing, that's how the soul slowly but surely leaves the body. And they work in this process together. And either cremation is basically completely destroying the body, not allowing the soul to complete its journey, or doing other things like embalming or that kind of thing, basically does not allow the body to decompose, which also does not allow for the soul to go together in this journey. In other words, they work very much hand in hand. They're created in a way that the body and soul work together, and slowly but surely they start separating in that way. So just a side digression. So now we're going to get back into what does this mean for us? Meditating gives us incredible appreciation for the world and the experience and the life that we live. And if we are able to appreciate these things in a proper way, and how much more joy and happiness will we have with the world around us? Okay. So take, for example, these are different species, different characteristics, and the different fates that each one has. Now, most of us, we experience the world with its color, with its beauty. But imagine if we were not able to see the color immediately. Imagine if we're not able to envision everything the way it happens. And then suddenly a light is turned on. Imagine if there's someone blind and that person can't see, could only hear sounds, try to put things together, could only feel. Then suddenly a light is turned on. Did anything change? Not really. Or if someone is colorblind, they don't see things in the right color. Imagine suddenly you put the color in. Think of an old movie from the 1940s, which is black and white, and then suddenly they put color in, and you're like, wow, this is amazing. So the same is true about life as a whole. We're going to see this in a beautiful parable from the Baal Shem Tov. The following parable I heard from my master, my grandfather, the Baal Shem Tov of blessed memory. There was once a talented musician that played beautiful, sweet music. All who heard it were mesmerized by the sweet, pleasurable, blissful sounds. They could not hold themselves back from dancing to the rafters in sheer ecstasy. The closer the people drew to the source of music, the more entranced they became. And the next dancing. Just then, a deaf individual came across the scene. Not noticing the musician, he simply observed people dancing wildly and regarded them as crazy. What on earth could make people so ridiculously joyful all of a sudden? He muttered to himself. Now, if he were intelligent, wise, and knowledgeable, he would deduce that they must be dancing to a delightful melody. In fact, contemplating the depth of pleasure they must be experiencing, judging by their response, he would be moved to join them. The dance analogy is obvious. This was an answer to a question that the Baal Shem Tov was asked. Why are Hasidim always joyful? Why do they always dance when they pray? Some people point this out about myself, I know. Moving about during prayers. We shuckle, we move. And his response was basically that if you're moving, you don't hear the music, you don't move. When you hear the music, you start to move. That's what happens in the village's square, right? So that's what he's trying to say. The difference is they know how to tap into the music. So that's our real question. How do we tap into the music? So we're going to ask Rabbi Label Wolf to help us with this a little bit. And this is where your flower in front of you comes to play. Let me get the video. Second. Skip ahead a little bit.
Design underlies every aspect of creation. It's quite amazing that as you know the world, you find possesses an element of design. Doctors, scientists, artists all point to the fact that design creates for them the pattern of what their work is all about.
I'm sorry. Let me press pause
Underlying
for a
design
second.
is a designer.
1 second. Let me fix the sound here. There's the sensitivity we're talking about. You have to be able to tap into the sound. No, it's not allowing me to play it from here. Okay, let's try it again. Second. Okay, let's see if it works now. Okay, hopefully we'll just try and hear it as good as we can. No, not playing at all.
Design underlies aspect. It's quite amazing that as you note the world, you find that everything possesses an element of design. Doctors, scientists, artists all point to the fact that design creates for them the pattern of what their work is all about. Underlying design is a keep that in mind. Lift your flower and observe it. Have a good look at it. Look at the petals. See the thin veins, the pattern inscribed. Beyond the petals, look deep within, and you might see the ovule deeply embedded within, from which grows the stigma. The flower with the same elements. Gently close your eyes and bring to mind that flower that you have in your hand. Become aware of its exquisite color. A shade that's difficult to verbalize. And remember, every flower is designed subtly differently. Raise the flower to your nose. What is its scent? Its perfume. If you were to find a word to describe that scent, what would it be? Touch one of the petals. Press it lightly. Feel its texture. Soft. It may even be furry. Its unique texture. In your mind's eye, imagine a bee flying into flower, looking for the pollen deep within, buzzing with satisfaction. Listen to that buzz. A flower is one of the most sensuous creations that God has made in the universe. You are that flower. You have a pattern, a unique structure. You are a flower that God's created in his garden, in its garden, in her garden. Admire the you that possesses so many aspects of clear design. And you have been designed for your purpose. The world is a flower. The world possesses design. The world is purposeful. At all times, be aware, be mindful of the innate beauty and uniqueness of design in the world, in creation. And that way, alignment and the purpose God has for you individually.
Okay. Sorry about all the technical issues here.
We also learned another thing during this exercise, that the way certain people relate to the flower is different as well. For some people, they connect it very well. For some people, made them sneeze, right? Exactly. And that's actually, it's all part of the lesson. It's all part of the lesson. It's all part of what we're learning here. So again, I want to remind you, again, I want to remind you that if you want to watch any of these videos again, you can do so. Just go to myjli.com/meditation, and you can watch any of these again. Okay.
What's the address?
myjli.com/meditation. It's in your book a number of times. Also, in the back page of the book, you'll see it. Is it? It should be in the back cover. Yeah, it's on the back cover. You have all the online resources in the back cover. Okay. All right, back to business. Here we go. So when we continue to meditate in the soul of reality, so you begin to sense that God is not just a distant or elusive being, but he's here. He's here with us. He's here in this world. He's here in everything that happens, everything that takes place. It pervades every inch of existence, every moment of life. And you may not be able to see it clearly, but imagine that you're in a dark room, feeling a little scared, but you're next to a loved one, you're holding their hand, they're helping you walk, they're helping you get through that room. You hear the tremor of their muscles, the life force. You're able to feel the energy. That's same is true with everything that we have in this world. If we think about it, if we meditate on it, then we feel that God is very close and is in everything that happens in this world. Text number 7. Meditate on the fact that the divine presence fills the entire universe. and that God's intimate presence is with you constantly. This will allow you to constantly joyful. This will allow you to be constantly joyful, realizing and believing with perfect faith that the divine presence is with you, protecting you. Realize that you are gazing at the divine, and that God is gazing at you. God can do as he pleases, and is the source of all the goodness and suffering in the world. For his divinity and sustaining force is within each item of existence. So knowing that God is with you at every moment, at every juncture in life, is very comforting. We tend to look for God at dark moments, at difficult times. Does this contradict free will? Very good question. I'm going to answer that question briefly because it's really a longer discussion. But the brief answer to the question of free will is free will means that you have a choice in what you do with circumstances. That's the free will. The fact that God is there and the fact that everything has God's presence, that's something that doesn't change. Ultimately, God gives us the free will to make the decisions in what we want to do with that situation, how we react to that situation. That is where the free will comes to play. And that is indeed free will. Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz, a prolific thinker, probably some of you have heard of him, translated the entire Talmud, and he was very close. He was a chassid. And once he traveled to New York to visit the Rebbe, and he said, the Rebbe asked him, "Where's your wife?" He said, "I came alone this trip." He's traveling from Israel to New York. He said, "I came alone this trip." The Rebbe said, "What do you mean you're alone? A Jew is never alone. God is always with you." And so this is where we have to realize that God is always there. And when we try to shape our constant awareness of this, it changes the way we live. Text number 8 from the Baal Shem Tov. It is a tremendous achievement to constantly meditate on the fact that we are close to God and that we are literally and entirely encompassed by his presence. We should try to remain connected to this reality to the extent that reflection becomes unnecessary because we mentally envision God everywhere constantly. At that point, we see that God is the place of the world. He pre-exists all the existence, and all existence exists within God. This includes, of course, each of us as well. With this meditation, we fulfill a directive recorded in the Code of Jewish Law to set God before us at all times. Think of it like wearing glasses with a colored lens. You now see everything with a colored tinge without having different text there. So think about it as wearing glasses. It's not working. There we go. You see the world differently, even when we're not thinking about it. If wearing a red tinted glasses or blue tinted glasses, suddenly everything starts to look blue. How we look at things, the glasses that we put on, changes the way life is for us. So we have to think about things in a different way. We have to meditate about it in a different way and recognize that God is with us at every moment. Now we're going to take this a step further. It's not just that God is there, but everything that happens is also part of a greater plan. Let's take a look at the metaphor of the soul. There we go. the soul is not only present in our actions, but the soul is a very conscious actor. It's not only allowing us to, but what we do is part of our choices and decisions that has to be part of what our soul is doing. In other words, our soul is not just allowing us to exist and move, but our soul has to be part of our inspiration of the things that happen. And we become more conscious of the soul of the universe as well. And then we realize that nothing is just happening by chance. It's not just that that God is allowing everything to exist, that God's allowing everything to move, and that there is an energy making it happen. But that everything is specifically designed in a certain way, in a particular way, that it should come about, that this thing should happen in this moment at this time. We're not always conscious about it. We seem to think that everything is happening on its own. But there are moments that we are awakened to this point. The Psalm says, text number 9, he covers the heavens with clouds, prepares rain for the earth, and causes mountains to sprout grass. He gives an animal its food, and as well to the hungry young ravens that call out. God is helping to feed them. God is helping to take care of them. When we look at a National Geographic video, or if you actually went to Africa and you're able to see, and you see that there is a lion there going to attack whatever a wildebeest or whatever to get its meal. That is actually God giving it its meal at that moment, at that time. Sometimes it's successful and sometimes it's not. When it's successful, it's because God wanted that wildebeest to be eaten. When it's not, it's because that one was supposed to get away. Nothing just happens. This is what King David is saying. We perceive the world as just a natural order, but every wind that flies from every leaf that flies in the wind from a plant or a tree is all meant to be. If it ends up being pulled away or blown away, if that leaf is being used as a tea, everything is guided and everything is meant to be. God's hand guides everything that happens in this world. And everything is part of this creative reality. And everything is supposed to happen. Story that the Baal Shem Tov once shared. We saw a leaf falling from the ground, and he told the students, see that leaf fell? God made the wind blow that leaf should fly off, because there was a little worm that cried out to God saying, it's too hot for me. So God made the wind blow that the leaf blew down and covered that little worm to allow it to everything is a series of miracles. Everything happens the way it's meant to be, the way God makes it happen. Woody Allen once said, if you want to make God laugh, tell him about your plans. We've all had things happen to us that we didn't expect, that we didn't turn out as planned. Now, again, you want to know about free choice. The free choice is, how do we react to that? That's where there's a free choice. But if we allow ourselves to make the decision to appreciate the fact that this is what's meant to be, in many instances, we'll actually be able to see God's hand playing out at that moment. Not always will we see it very clearly, but many times, yes. But the thing is that we tend to look for God one thing. And we forget that the things that are working out, that's part of God's plans too. And when things don't work out, like, oh God, what happened? What do you mean? And did you wake up and say, oh God, thank you, that's great, everything worked out? Yeah.
Albert Einstein was having a discussion of probability physics, theoretical cosmic theory.
Yeah.
And he finally blurted out, God does not play dice with the universe.
Right. Oh, very good. Yeah. So, talking about dice, you can say it's luck or chance, but luck or chance only could happen once or twice. How often do you win the lottery? But to know that everything that's happening, it's meant to be in this way. And again, we may not always see it, but if you are constantly allow ourselves to open up in this way, we will see again and again God's hand playing out. Next time you end up stuck in traffic, or you veer off onto the wrong road, and say, well, God wants me to make a blessing in this place. God wants me to say a prayer here, because this place never had a prayer said. So you may not see that person that you expected to meet, but you were able to bring about something in this world. So these are the moments that we're able to see it many times. And again, sometimes not, but the idea is to recognize that everything that happens is there with a purpose, with a reason. And when we develop this awareness and we acknowledge the divine master plan that is guiding reality, then the attitude toward it changes. Your life becomes calmer, become more serene, more settled. Missing that flight, maybe it's not the end of the world. So many of our frustrations and our negative feelings, they come about because we have certain expectations of life. We expect that something should happen like this. I need to be in this place at 5:30 exactly. Maybe you really don't have to be there at 5:30. Maybe you're not meant to be there. So when what we expect and what we want should happen for us doesn't happen, then we get nervous, get excited, get upset, we feel angry, we feel that we're deprived, we lose self-confidence, we aren't as good, we're insecure. Within our mindset, everything didn't go exactly as we envisioned. And so there's a challenge, there's a disappointment. But if we're aware that every detail of our lives, from everything that we have, from our personality to our skill set that we're born with, from our life situation that we have, from the circumstances, the experiences, from things that happen, everything is intentionally directed by God, then changes our whole perspective in things. He arranged that life should be exactly the way it is. And he created me for this moment, for this time, for this situation. Yes.
I mean, how does that access for the idea of tikkun olam, for someone to just accept things the way they are?
Okay, first of all, you're asking a question with an assumption of tikkun olam. What does that mean, tikkun olam?
And doing what you can to make the world better.
Okay, so what's the problem with that?
Well, it seems like you're saying if things are not as you wish.
God wants you to make the world a better place. That's why you're in the place at this time. As I mentioned before, I gave an example. You drive off the road, you got lost, right? You don't know where you are. You were following, instead of Google Maps, you were following Waze. And Waze took you to a side road, and now you're completely lost. You get frustrated. Maybe God needed you to be in this place, in this time, so that you can, as I gave an example, so say a prayer in that time, make a blessing. This Baal Shem Tov once took his students out in the middle of the forest. They saw a little stream. He says, take some water, make a blessing. Took some water, make a blessing. They drank the water. They went home. They said, what was that? He said, that stream waited from the very beginning of creation that you should make a blessing on it, that someone should come and make a blessing on that water.
I see that point for sure, but I'm more getting at is like if you're in a prolonged, bad situation, or someone else that is in I know, just
An unexpected situation.
An animal being abused or whatever. I mean, are you supposed to, and it's difficult to do something about it, are you supposed to just accept it?
It was meant that you saw that at that moment. That exactly. You're just bringing out the point more. God put you in that moment, in that situation, so that you could be the one that could make a difference at that moment. Exactly. And that's what I said before. There was a question about free choice. The answer is that the free choice aspect is what we do in this, or the way we act in a particular situation. And that God does give man free choice. Only human beings have the ability of free choice. But where we end up and how we end up and what happens to us, that is all divinely inspired. Right? So you're actually helping the cause here. Let's read text number 10.
This kind of answers the question.
Right.
We're going to read.
Oh, yeah. One of the Rebbe Maharash once said, statements such as if I could have, if I would have, if I was, if I were, in a certain sense, all these are statements that are denial of God. If you think about that for a moment. Saying, if I could have, if I would have, if I was, if I were only. These, in a certain sense, all these type of statements are all denial of God, because what you're saying is that I should have been somewhere else. I should have had a different life than the life that I had, right? Let's look at text number 10. With reference to your writing about doubts and difficulty, about your feelings of insecurity in general, I trust that it is necessary to elaborate to you at length. I trust it is unnecessary, to elaborate to you at length, that such feelings arise when a person thinks that he is alone and can only rely upon himself and his own judgment, and therefore feels doubtful and insecure about each move he has to make. And while he also trusts in God, this trust is somehow superficial, without permeating him and his way of life in every detail. And only on certain days, such as the high holidays, he feels more close to God. When a person's deep faith in God is deep, and when he reflects that God's benevolent providence extends to each and every person and to each and every detail and each and every minute, surely he must develop a profound sense of security and confidence. The concept of divine providence is better understood in the original term of hashgacha pratis. For hashgacha pratis means careful watchfulness, for which reason the term hashgacha is also used in connection with the law of kashrus. I pointed this out before, where every detail has to be carefully watched. Nor is another translation, which is sometimes used in connection with hashgacha pratis, namely supervision, entirely satisfactory in this case, because supervision implies overseeing, that is to say, seeing from above, whereas hashgacha, in the sense of God's watchfulness, means knowing matters through and through. The belief in such hashgacha pratis is basic to our religion and the way of life, so much so that before every new year and during the beginning of the new year, we say twice daily Psalm 27, God is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear? God is the strength of my life, of whom shall I be afraid? From this it follows that even if things happen not as desired according to human calculations, and even if it seems that even according to the Torah, it should have been different. A Jew still puts his trust in God. Right? So often we don't understand that. We may not understand. We may not understand God's ways. We may not be able to clearly define it. Sometimes we could get a little bit of a glimpse into explaining what took place and why. But regardless, the message is the same. There's a book from an author, Brian Cady, called 1,000 Names of Joy. And she writes, life is very simple. Everything happens for you, not to you. Everything happens exactly the right moment, neither too soon nor too late. You don't have to like it. It's just easier if you do. Good line. Yeah. So anyone has a moment in life where they were triggered to a negative emotion and then suddenly you felt different when you realized that it was part of the plan? Yes, you could think of some. You could think of such.
I was
time.
finding a
No.
new job. It's like that.
Finding a new job. Yeah, I find that a lot with a new job. Yeah, exactly. You know, you when you hope and expect things in a certain way, that's when things go wrong. But if you truly believe that everything is meant to be, then now we're going to take this even a step further. So first we said that God is within everything. Then we said that God is doing everything with a plan. God has a plan. Now we're going to take it a step further. And the final aspect of this is, not only does God have a plan, but in each and everything that happens, each and every movement is part of a greater picture within God's plan. In other words, it's not just that God has a good plan that things should go right for me. God has a plan that things should go right for the cheetah in Africa. But it's more than that. Every single aspect of life is part of a much greater picture, and we are fitting in that little puzzle in life. And we are needed for that moment, at that time, to make that difference that is expected of each and every one of us as an individual. Let's take a look at text number 11, the previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson. The Baal Shem Tov taught that divine providence does not only mean that God orchestrates the individual movement of each of the manifold created entities, and that the same providence is actually determining the existence and life of that entity. It also means that the particular movement of a single entity bears their overall purpose of creation. Take, for example, the slightest quiver of a solitary sliver of a plant nourishing in the belly of a forest, or upon some tremendous mountain, or in one of our planet's deepest valleys that has never been traversed by human. The plant's movements to the right, to the left, forward, or backward throughout the duration of its lifespan are actively determined by ongoing divine providence. God has issued a specific decree. This particular plant will live for a specific amount of months, days, and hours, and that during this life, it will turn and bend in these directions in a certain amount of time. Beyond all that, however, each of these particular movements is significant for the overall purpose of creation. Through the combination and synthesis of all the myriad particular occurrences involving countless millions of species and subdivisions that exist within all the four kingdoms, the sublime divine intent that underpins all of creation is consummated. Not only is every feature of every entity divinely orchestrated, it plays an indispensable role in the divine purpose of creation. So, it's not only that everything is orchestrated by God. But everything is orchestrated in a way that it's part of the purpose, it's part of God's plan. It's part of the overall picture of the way the world is meant to play out. And take a look at the picture that you have in figure 3.2. This is sort of what it is. You have this pixels, which is a little dot. This is every moment each and every one of us have. And then we start putting together the pixels, and we start seeing a much greater picture. This is the purpose of creation. We don't always see how we are part of that picture because we're just that little pixel. And people sometimes get overwhelmed. We start to think about the world and the vast world and billions of people in the world, and how could I actually matter and make a difference? This is really where this idea comes to play. When we know that each occurrence and experience is like a pixel of the world, the purpose of creation is an image. We normally experience one movement on its own. We take one step at a time. Sometimes it seems negative, confusing, but we each are a purpose and part of God's plan. And if we think about this in this way, that we're a single pixel, part of billions and billions of pixels of this incredible picture, we'll call it, called creation. This is a puzzle that's needed to have the ultimate world, the ultimate redeemed world, the way it's meant to be. But if you think about this as every single creation, every single blade of grass, every single tree, as he said, a tree in some huge forest, the Ocala National Forest tree, it's moving, is meant to be part of the purpose of creation. Now think about this in each and every one of us. But essentially we're saying in two words, you matter. You matter. You are not just here to live, to survive, to get through life, to make it through life. You are part of a greater picture in life because you are needed to be at this moment, at this time, in this place, to accomplish something special, something important, something meaningful. You are part of a role of the greater cosmic drama of life. I don't know why I'm showing all these slides, but anyway. So if everything in the world has a purpose, so surely we have a purpose too. Our very existence is important. Our identity is important. Our being, thought, speech, and action is important. Because we have to make a difference in life. Text number 12. Just as we enjoin to believe in God, so must we subsequently believe in ourselves. In other words, we must believe that God has provided us with a mission in life, and our lives are not meaningless, but rather our souls come from God, the source of life, and God is delighted and satisfied when we execute his will. A wife is going to the store. She tells her husband, "Do you want anything?" He says, "Yeah, I want something that has meaning, that has purpose in life. I could really have some fulfillment, something to be meaningful for my soul, to help me connect to God." She says, "Be more specific." So truly believing in God in this sense means that you matter. Everything you do matters. Every situation in life that you find yourself matters. And the reason that you ended up in the airport at that time and your flight was missed because God needed you to be in the airport at that time, at that moment. Not only it's okay, it's going to be okay, it's all for our good. That's one level. The other level is at this time, at this moment, to make a difference. It's something that no one else could do except for me in this time, in this place. Imagine if every time we look at ourselves in a situation and think to ourselves, what does God want of me right now? What does he want from me? And how can I make a difference in this situation, in this particular way of life? You know, as Chabad Hasidim, we were always raised in this way, even though we constantly are learning more and more. But, you know, this was always something that we're always encouraged. You got to go and do something with your situation. You got to make something of it because you are needed in this moment. You are needed in this moment, in this time, in this place. In other words, it's not just everything will be okay. Everything is good and everything's for a good reason and everything will work out. What are you going to make, talking about Tikkun Olam, how are you going to make the world better? How am I going to make a difference at this moment, at this time? That God put me in a situation that only I, in this time, in this place, could make that change, could make that difference. This is very powerful. I'll admit, sometimes I'm keep using airports, but because that's always where people are the most frustrated. Sometimes I sit in the airport and I'm just eating a snack and, you know, whatever, drinking coffee or whatever. I'm thinking I should really be doing something. I should really be getting up and, you know, talking to the person next to me or whatever it is. But if we constantly live our life in this way, then everything becomes change, everything becomes meaningful. I think in one particular situation, I was in St. Louis to New York. And I'd gone for my grandmother's unveiling, which was in St. Louis. And I see that they're looking around the flight, seeing who's there on the flight. I see there's one Orthodox Jew on the flight. He has a hat. He wasn't a Chabad Jew. He was an Orthodox Jew, a yeshiva guy. And I get on the plane. Sure enough, he's sitting right next to me. I say, you know, what are the chances that of everyone on this plane? This guy's going to be sitting right next to me. I said to myself, you know, what can I do at this moment? I clearly didn't have to ask him to put on tefillin. That's usually what we would say because he did that already. I had with me a laptop. At that time, there were CDs in the laptops, and I just got a new CD of one of the of a new Farbrengen that was released on CD. One of the Rebbe's Farbrengens who was this was right before the Rebbe's Yahrzeit and Gimel Tammuz, and the Farbrengen was from 12th of Tammuz. I put it in the CD, I started playing it. I plugged it in my headpiece. I said, "Here, take this and listen." He sat and listened for almost the entire flight, which was about an hour and a half straight. And he was asking me questions, saying things that I've never heard any of this before. Like he never was introduced to any Hasidic concepts before. He was what we call a Litvak, it's a very Lithuanian background where they never learned Hasidus, they never learned, any of the mystical meanings of Torah, very halacha, very law-based kind of teachings. And he was never introduced to any Hasidic teachings before. And here he listened for an hour and a half on a flight, almost 2 hours, whatever, straight, to teachings, Hasidic teachings. And, I said to myself, could have been, I don't know, anything could have happened, but here I happen to have had this. So, and these things happen. The reason I'm using this, because, usually we have a standard, but I ask someone to put on tefillin or whatever, but this obviously wasn't a standard. Anyway, so let's continue on text number 13. We should recognize and fully appreciate that our travels to various locations are not random. Each journey is specifically directed by God. The divine intention in orchestrating these journeys is that each individual has been allotted a specific portion of the material world to spiritually rectify. Our portions are in specific locations to which we must journey. We accomplish these acts of rectification in a variety of ways, such as through studying Torah or praying in that location, or through eating, drinking, and sleeping there for the sake of properly serving God, or through another means of performing God's will in that place. While Shantav associated this concept with the verse, God establishes steps of man, Psalms 37, meaning that a person's desire to relocate to a specific place is actually inspired by God for the purpose of that individual to engage in a particular aspect of divine service, thereby rectifying whatever this person has been appointed to rectify. When we have any given location, we must reflect on this deeper reality and challenge ourselves. Why am I here? It is certainly not random. For what achievement did God lead me on this spot? When we meditate on this perspective and we reframe every part of our lives, we help find meaning and purpose in otherwise maybe unfortunate circumstances, or maybe just blast circumstances, like no meaning at all. Maybe we can make it meaningful. Maybe you end up at a meeting or a convention or a gathering. Well, you're meant to end up in that place in that time. Before I go to the video, I'm going to share one story I just heard last night. The story was shared by a businessman named, he was a businessman, his name was Rabbi Nemes. And I don't remember the country. He was going on business. He was a stamp dealer, and so he was. Let's see if I can find. And he was. You know what? Let me. I don't remember the name of the country, so I'll get back to it. Let me share the following story from Rabbi Mendel Futterfass. He said, I was imprisoned in a Siberian labor camp, and he was assisting others who from the USSR in dark post-war World War II. We know what the communist regime was doing, arresting people, putting them in gulags. And so Rabbi Mendel Futterfass was there, and he was arrested. His crime, that he wanted to live as a religious Jew. That was illegal. He wanted to teach others to live by the way of Torah and mitzvahs. That was illegal. Oh, at least they considered it illegal. But they also had other prisoners. What were prisoners? Anyone that they considered a threat to the regime. You had doctors, scientists, political activists, and all kinds of people there who were all considered threats to the regime, who were were not accepted as the Soviet ideology that they had. They were, of course, always very down, very upset, very angry. But their colleague, Reb Mendel, who was in prison with them, was always happy, he was always upbeat, and even though he had a very, very difficult life, he lost some children, it was very, very difficult life, but he was always happy and upbeat. And they said to him, how is it that you are able to always be so upbeat and so happy? And he said, you see, you are defined by what you do. If you're a doctor, you're defined by being a doctor. If you're a political activist, that's your definition. If you're a scientist, then you're defined by being a scientist. He says, my definition is just being a Jew and serving God. So if it means I have to do it outside of prison, which would make more sense, seemingly, and then I'll serve God inside of prison. This is where I am, then I'll do that here. So I'm not changing my definition of who I am. And this is appreciating every moment, not only appreciating everything that happens in life, but seeing how we are meant to be at that place at that time to make a difference. We're going to watch another meditation.
Life isn't random. There is a subtle cause and effect relationship that operates in your life. And that cause and effect relationship relates to a master planner ingrained within your soul and within the world. Our task is to recognize the turnings in life and be able to choose freely those that correspond to the master plan. Gently close your eyes. Just become aware of the silence in the room. Become aware of the emptiness of the space, and that you, as a ball of small energy, occupies a place in that space. Become aware of your life. Go back to the beginning, early childhood. Observe the facets that seem to be recalled quickly. Then your teenagehood. What incidents come quickly to mind? And adulthood. The transition within and between are catalysts. Catalysts that project you into the next phase of your life. The catalysts aren't arbitrary. Hashem places these catalysts into your life to keep nudging you towards a destiny, your personal destiny. Be aware that life is not random, but your capacity to reach your destiny quickly, clearly, painlessly. It's part of your free choice, how you respond to the catalysts of life. Hashem imbues your life with purpose, but the way that you choose allows that purpose to be expressed optimally or less optimally. There's meaning to your life. The way you choose leaves footprints in the sands of time and in the world itself. Practice mindfully how to exercise choice so that your purpose overlaps with Hashem's destiny for you. And that way you achieve fulfillment, life's meaning, in a way that is painless, optimized, and in keeping with the intent of your reincarnation, why you, your soul, your innate plan plays a significant role in the world. You are special. God has embedded specialness, individuality in your life. Live your purpose.
I mentioned a story before. I'm actually gonna play the entire story on a video for you. But first, let's get here. These are the 3 points that we said today. Number 1, we are constantly in God's presence, and that itself leads to joy, knowing that, knowing that we're never alone, that God's always there. Number 2, everything is intentional, and this helps us overcome struggle, knowing that there's a reason, there's a purpose, everything that happens, that we shouldn't get frustrated, things that don't seem to work out. And finally, that everything is part of a purpose of creation, and everything that happens not only was meant to be, but is part of the greater purpose and reason that each and every one of us were created at that moment, at that time. So we think about these things and we try to bring that and
mastermind the benefits of divine closeness.
And